The easiest and the safest way to become aware of God's will is to become aware of the heart center. If one opens up the heart center first, then he becomes inseparably one with God's will. At that time, if his third eye is opened up, he cannot make any mistake. His past, his present or future cannot create any problem for him. The happenings of the holy past or the immediate present or the ultimate future can no longer create any problem for him, for he becomes inseparably one with God's universal vision and transcendental reality. Inside God's universal vision and God's transcendental reality, all the things that he sees, feels, and grows into can be perfectly housed without any problems whatsoever. Some of you may be curious to know what actually happens before the third eye opens. Before the third eye actually opens up, the seeker feels a kind of sensation on the third eye. In the beginning, the seeker may feel a tiny ant, sensation of a tiny ant moving around. A few days or a few months later, the seeker inwardly will envision a disc. It rotates from the left to the right. And when it starts rotating very fast from the left to the right, it changes its motion from the right to the left. Then it rotates from left to right, right to left. And once, after a few months, a few years, you may notice that a fully illumined sun, like a bright sun midday, noon, you see the sun in the forehead. This sun indicates the total opening of the third eye. Once the third eye is opened up, the infinite vast, the eternal height, the immeasurable depth, you can see inside the third eye. You can see yourself as the seed of the entire creation. You can see yourself as the tree of the entire creation. You can see yourself as the fruit of the entire creation. Seed is the past, and the tree is the present, and the fruit is the future. There are some spiritual masters who tell their students that it is not advisable to open up the third eye. what is of paramount importance is right from the beginning to surrender to God's will. If so is the will of God, God will grant the vision which He Himself is. If God wants to give vision to a certain seeker, He will grant. Why? Just because He wants to make a perfect instrument of that person. The hour has struck. But if a seeker untimely pulls the reality or the vision reality of the third eye, it will create tremendous disaster for the seeker. On the one hand, the third eye is the eye of illumination for the sincere seekers. On the other hand, for the curiosity mongers, the third eye is nothing but temptation. Your third eye, I mean the opening of the third eye. Third eye is like a toy that a child plays with. Then, after a few years, gives up, does not play with toys anymore. He studies for knowledge. He prays and meditates for inner wisdom. Here, the seeker, after he has played for a few years with the third eye, the toy, he wants to acquire infinite wisdom light. This wisdom light he gets on the strength of his constant surrender to God's will and by virtue of his inmost cry. The third eye can see the past, present and future. It can command also the past, the present to do something, but it cannot change humanity's cry into divinity's smile. We see something, but we don't have the capacity to change it. If you can't change it, then it remains imperfect. But if we see something and have the capacity to perfect it, then it is worth seeing. But if one has discovered himself, has realized the highest truth, then if he sees something and if it needs perfection, then he can perfect it. So it is the self-discovery that can be of real help to the third eye. When the third eye observes something and it needs perfection, the third eye gets the necessary help from the self-discovery. two earthly eyes, human eyes, are side by side together, but they cannot see each other. Here there are two eyes, one cannot see the other. Why? Because of the limitations, because of the bondage that each eye embodies the nearest thing it cannot observe. But if we stand in front of a mirror, then we at once see both the eyes at our sweet will, and we see how one helps the other. Similarly, when we stand in front of our highest reality, God, and see God with our third eye, then only the life, human life, reaches its acme, perfection. Otherwise, the third eye will see that it will not offer any satisfactory result or abiding satisfaction to the seekers of the ultimate truth. But if it sees God, if it sees infinite truth, light, and if it can embody all the time God's divine presence, and if it can feel God's universal reality inside its vision, then only the perfection of the opening of the third eye takes place.